Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, we'll be trying to create something called use intersection observer custom hook. So let me give an example of scenario where you'll be requiring it. Suppose you have an infinite scroll list where you want to do something when you reach the end of the list. Suppose make an API call, etc. So in this case, what we'll do is like whenever you reach the middle of this yellow part, we're doing a console log. But you can imagine you can do an API call, etc., etc. So for that, we'll be creating the hook and we'll be using the intersection observer API. So it's a basic markup which we have. We have position height as 200 VH, position as relative, and I have put absolute. I have basically absolutely positioned this element with respect to the div container. So now let me create the hook. Use intersection observer, and it should be PSX. Sorry about that. RA, RAFCE. So what we'll do is like we'll be returning the intersection observer. So first of all, let me do one thing. Let me create a use state variable to have the intersection observer. And I'm assuming you know the intersection observer API. Otherwise, MDN is a very good resource for this. I would suggest you to check that out. Const intersection observer entry set intersection observer entry use state. By default, it will be null, or otherwise it will be intersection observer entry. This is provided by this is the automatic type which you get from, and you can see the MDN reference also if you're interested. Anyways, I'll return this. Now I'll be needing a ref, and the ref will be of the last element where we want to observe basically. So here I'm needing to pass this ref, which will be I'll be having a type ref new table ref object. It can be element or we can pass null for some reason. Then we'll be having options which will be passed to the intersection observer API, and it will be optional again, which will have intersection observer. I think it should be in it, I guess. So now we'll be having use effect. In this, we'll see if the ref doesn't change and the options also don't change. Here I'm assuming the options are memoized, but I would suggest you to make it more optimized later on. But for this simple naive solution, I think it would suffice. Anyways, we'll be first checking if the ref is there or not. And the intersection observer is somewhat relatively newer API. So I'll be checking whether the type of intersection observer is a function or not. If it is a function, that means it exists in this browser. Then we need to just create an observer, which will be observer equal to new intersection observer. We need to pass the couple of things to it. One is we'll be getting the entries for each of the whenever we observe anything. So basically, whenever we get the entry, we'll be taking the first entry, which will be the div element which I showed you just now. And that's why we need to observe it also. Observer.observe. This is the first entry, that's why zero entry. You can observe a dot something, it will be first entry, something like that. You can imagine like that. If I made any mistakes, I would say to check it out the MDN docs if you get confusion for some reason. Anyway, ref dot current. Then we need to return also. Suppose this hook, whenever the component which is using this hook needs to unmount, we need to basically do a couple of things here. First, we need to make the set intersection observer entry as null, and we need to disconnect the observer. We just need to pass disconnect, I guess. Yeah, void. So that should do it. Now, wherever we're using it, we need to call it. First of all, let me have a ref here. Ref equal to ref, use ref. By default, it can be null or it can be an HTML div element in our case, or null. Then we can have use intersection observer. We need to pass the ref to it as well as the options. Here I'll memorize the options like I mentioned to you previously. Const to not have a different reference every time. Otherwise, we'll have a lot of issues with the intersection observer API, since it will try to create a new instance of the. Basically, what will happen is that it will try to, whenever options change, it will try to recreate again and again. So it will cause issues. That's why. So the options will be, I'll be returning an object only. Let me do one thing. Okay. Yeah. So options will be, first will be root. Root will be the div. Uh, in our case, it will be the div or the you can say the viewport, but you can decide what exactly is the parent container. It's basically to identify the parent container. In our case, it will be viewport since we are passing null. Root margin is to basically allow different kinds of padding or margin. Padding you can imagine in that way, like uh, suppose if you give 10 pixels, it will take the 10 pixels into consideration while detecting the overlaps. I'm trying to explain simpler terms. Hopefully it's clear. Otherwise, MDN is a good place. 0 pixel. And lastly, we need the threshold. Threshold is more like how much do you want the threshold? Like, do you want it to, do you want to execute the callback maybe in 10% when the element is visible or 50%, something like that. It is in 0 to 1 if I recall. 0 is for 0%, 1 is for 100%. So I'll give it as zero point 0.5. I think it should be a number. To get better types, let me do one thing. Intersection, observer, options. I think it was init again. Yeah. So now you can see root margin, string undefined, threshold is a number or arrays or undefined. So anyway, we'll pass the options here. And now what we can do is like when we're getting the intersection observer, we can listen on, or we can basically, once again, there are a couple of very interesting things which we can control or log. Intersection observer entry dot is intersecting, whether it's intersecting or not, and otherwise intersection ratio, basically 50%, 10%, something like that. So anyway, let us see now what is the output. First of all, let me refresh and go back on the top because it currently is visible completely. Refresh, by default it's 0, false 0, 0. 2 times render because I've used React strict mode. Ignore that. Now if I go slowly, slowly, when it becomes 50%, its intersecting is true and it's showing that 0.06% is the ratio. I think if you can multiply, I think it will become 68%, I guess. I might be wrong here. Again, 0, 0. I can modify these values. Threshold is 0.2%, suppose, then 20% only. Then I should call the, one second. So 0.01. Okay, I think that was it. If I think that was it basically. If I would suggest you to check out the MDN docs if things were confusing somewhat. I think intersection observer API is quite useful in a lot of scenarios. So I would suggest you check that out. Anyways, and I think that's it for this video and bye.